In the spring of 1963, in a cluster of stone and mud houses so remote that the nearest paved road was an hour's walk away, the villagers of Yerba Buena stopped going to work in the fields. They stopped tending crops. They stopped eating regular meals. Every spare hour went to ceremonies held in a cave outside town, led by a woman they had never heard of 6 months earlier. A woman who told them she was a goddess. When police finally reached Yerba Buena that May, they found something that took investigators years to fully account for. Not a massacre, not a single crime. A sustained ritual killing operation that had been running for months, hidden inside a community of a few dozen people, with everyone watching. The question that case file never fully answered: how, exactly, did 2 con artists from Monterrey turn a poor farming valley into something that looked like this? Santos Garza and his brother Cayetano Garza had been running small frauds in and around Monterrey for years before they found Yerba Buena. The village sat in a narrow valley in Tamaulipas, 3 hours from anything resembling a city, and it had no telephone, no police post, and no priest resident in town. The brothers arrived with a story. They were messengers of the gods, and the gods had a specific interest in Yerba Buena. They told villagers that ancient Aztec deities were prepared to reveal themselves, to reward the faithful with health, wealth, and protection from the poverty that had always defined life in the valley. The community was Catholic, but isolated from formal church oversight. The brothers knew what they were doing. They collected money from believers. Small amounts at first, just enough to participate in private ceremonies. Then the ceremonies got more elaborate, and the brothers realized they needed something they couldn't fake themselves. They needed a goddess. Magdalena Solís was, by most documented accounts, a sex worker from Monterrey who had grown up in extreme poverty. She was in her 20s. She was sharp. And when the Garza brothers came to her with their proposition, play the role of a deity, split the earnings, she agreed. What the brothers had not predicted was what happened when Magdalena actually walked into that cave. She did not perform the role they had written for her. She inhabited it. Villagers who later spoke to investigators described her as calm and absolute. Not theatrical, not pleading for belief. She simply stated what was required of them and waited. By the time spring was well underway, the Garza brothers had lost control of what they started. Magdalena Solís was running the ceremonies herself. The money was still coming in, but the demands she placed on the community had shifted into something the brothers had never planned to sell. She told her followers that the gods required blood to manifest fully, not animal blood. The community of Yerba Buena now had several hundred members, with a core of devoted inner circle followers who participated in the ceremonies directly. Among them, investigators would later document, were people who enforced Magdalena's commands against those who doubted. Between approximately March and May of 1963, at least 8 people were killed inside or near that cave. The deaths were not quick. They were ritual executions carried out in front of the congregation, designed, according to later survivor testimony, to prove that blood sacrifice would produce divine favor. Victims were beaten, burned, and in several cases had their blood drained into a cup that was then passed among followers. The victims were people who had shown doubt, members who asked too many questions, people who tried to leave. One documented victim was a young man named Celso Carlos Madrigal, who, according to testimony, had attempted to question the ritual demands. He was beaten to death in the cave in front of the congregation. Magdalena Solís did not only observe, she participated. In some instances, investigators concluded she directed the killing directly. The Garza brothers, who had never intended to kill anyone, were now accessories to multiple murders and too deep inside the operation to walk away. Sata Garza was, by this point, according to later court documents, following Magdalena's lead, not the other way around. The community believed. That was the mechanism no one outside could account for. The belief was real. Poverty, isolation, and the absence of any competing authority, no priest, no police, no radio, had produced a community in which the framework Magdalena offered was the only framework on offer. A 14-year-old boy named Sebastian Guerrero walked out of the valley and kept walking. He walked until he reached a town with a police post. He told an officer named Luis Martinez what he had seen in the cave. Martinez reportedly did not believe him. What is documented is that Martinez decided to go to the cave himself to see what the boy was describing. He did not come back. Luis Martinez was found dead near the cave. He had been beaten to death, the same method used on the cult's other victims. His body was discovered by state police, who went looking for him after he failed to report back. When federal police and soldiers arrived in force at Yerba Buena the following days, the Garza brothers were caught first. Santos Garza was shot and killed during the operation. Cayetano Garza was taken alive. Magdalena Solís was found inside the cave. She did not run. Investigators documented 8 confirmed victims, though some accounts cite higher numbers. The physical evidence inside the cave and at nearby sites included human remains in varying states of decomposition. The trial took place the following year. Magdalena Solís was convicted of multiple counts of murder. She was sentenced to 50 years in Mexican federal prison, the maximum available under Mexican law at the time. Cayetano Garza received the same sentence. The community of Yerba Buena effectively ceased to exist after the arrests. Residents scattered. The cave was not a place anyone returned to. What the Magdalena Solís case produced, beyond the convictions, was a forensic and sociological puzzle that Mexican authorities and later researchers continued to work through. 3 distinct lines of explanation have been developed, and none fully accounts for the whole of what happened. The first is the fraud that escalated model. The Garza brothers built a financial scheme, Magdalena extended it, and the violence developed incrementally as the operation needed to suppress doubters. The evidence for it, the operation's early phases were clearly financial, and the killings followed a pattern of targeting dissenters rather than random victims. The evidence against it, the speed and completeness of Magdalena's personal transformation from participant to director, suggests something beyond calculated escalation. The second explanation centers on Magdalena Solís specifically, that she experienced a genuine psychological break from the original scheme, and came to believe, or act as though she believed, in her own divinity. The evidence for it: no survivor testimony documented her expressing doubt about the ceremony's purpose. The evidence against it: she retained enough practical judgment to direct the enforcement apparatus against doubters, which implies situational awareness rather than total delusion. The third explanation is structural. Yerba Buena's extreme isolation, economic desperation, and absence of external authority created conditions in which any sufficiently confident alternative framework could displace rational resistance. The evidence for it: no documented equivalent event occurred in a Mexican community with regular access to media, clergy, or government presence during the same period. The evidence against it: dozens of other isolated Mexican rural communities did not produce anything comparable. Isolation was necessary, but not sufficient. What is not in dispute? 8 people were beaten to death in a cave in a Mexican farming valley over the course of approximately 10 weeks. A police officer went to investigate and did not come back. A 14-year-old boy was the only reason the operation ended when it did. Sebastian Guerrero walked out of that valley and kept walking, because he had seen something that needed to be seen by someone with a radio. He was right. Magdalena Solís served her sentence. The exact details of her post-incarceration life are not part of the public record. The cave is still there. Thank you for watching. If a story like this is why you're here, hit subscribe. We open a new file every few days. Every file in the vault has a story. We'll see you at the next one.